Welcome back. This show is all about the idea that we could have been here before in a past life. So far, we've seen ex-model and TV personality Linda Lusardi take part in a regression session where she appeared to vividly describe the life of Mary back in the 14th century.
Where are the boils? Black boils?
On my arms, on top of my legs.
The question is, what do you believe? Do you think that Linda was reliving moments from a past life, or do you think that it all came from her imagination? The idea that we could have lived before certainly stirs up some interesting debate.
Past life regression is genuine, and reincarnation is a reality. The evidence for reincarnation is so strong that I regard it as a fundamental plank of what I refer to as rational spirituality.
None of us like to confront the reality of our own mortality, and belief in reincarnation and the ability, apparently, to tap back into lives you already have led, mean that you're going to go on leading. This is just one chapter, if you like, in an endless book.
There is nothing that would persuade me that the past lives were real events. It is beyond the pale of science to imagine that experience from a previous life can be transferred to the memory circuits of the new brain.
In a moment, I'll be finding out exactly what Linda makes of it all, but first, it's time to find out the results of our detective work. Will the records back up Linda's story? Our expert historian has been following up the clues in Linda's regression.
Take yourself back 650 years. It's medieval England, and what Linda described is the life of Mary, a poor little peasant girl whose life ends as it began, against the odds, in the face of a terrible disease. It's a compelling story with some fascinating details, and this is how they checked out.
And what kind of clothes are you wearing?
Brown coat,
Tunic thing with a belt.
This is pretty accurate. A peasant girl would be wearing a smaller version of a grown woman's dress, and it would be exactly what Linda describes. A long dress or tunic made of rough cloth. A cord belt or strip of leather would have been drawn around the waist. It's a good description, so what else have we got?
Do you go to school?
no,
You don't go to school?
no,
Is anyone with you?
my brother. I like my brother.
In the 14th century, most peasant children wouldn't have gone to school. Some of the boys may have gone to the local church to learn prayers and basic reading, but girls would have stayed at home. Often for poor families, both parents had to work, so children would indeed be left to fend for themselves. So Linda builds a pretty good picture of the life of a poor family in 14th century England, and that detail is carried on in the descriptions of Mary's house.
And are there any other houses near your house?
Yeah,
And what are the houses made of?
wood and straw and mud and...
This is brilliant because what Linda's describing is a wattle and daub wall from the 14th century. And here it is. This is the wattle, split hazels forming a nice solid barrier. And the whole thing was covered in daub, a lovely mixture of mud, straw and dung.
And what things do you eat?
soup, stew,
And who makes the food for you?
me.
It's intriguing that Linda would give such a good description of a peasant girl's life. It was a tough life for the medieval poor, and Linda's story of Mary's adult life doesn't get much better either.
Do children die a lot?
Yeah.
Where are you
I
now?
lost four.
You've lost 4 babies.
4 babies.
Sadly, Linda's story is not that unusual because back in the mid-14th century, infant mortality was incredibly high, a staggering 17% of all babies lost either in the womb or within a month of being born. And the chances for their mothers weren't that great either, and with a lack of medicine amongst the poor, if you were a woman living back then, you would probably expect to lose at least 1 child. And if it wasn't bad enough for Mary losing 4 of her own children, she also had to contend with her disability.
My arm. Pins and needles all the time. Wow.
But there's one more clue that's really going to surprise you.
Boils. Black.
Where are the boils?
Under my arms. On top of my legs.
The tragedy that Linda describes, whilst undoubtedly awful, is, I think, fascinating. You see, I don't think she's talking about boils at all. I think she's talking about swollen lymph nodes that could come up underneath your armpits or even under your neck, often the size of a golf ball. And that's important because they're symptomatic of the greatest disease to hit medieval England, the bubonic plague. And what's more, she gives us this fantastic date.
What year is it, do you know?
1, 3, 4, 6, I think.
1346. Now, Linda tells us that her children died 2 years later, 1348, and this is where it gets really exciting. Because in that year, Britain was hit by the biggest natural disaster in our history, the Black Death. Otherwise known as the bubonic plague, the Black Death swept across the countryside, killing tens of thousands. Over a third of the population just disappeared, and whole villages ceased to exist. For me, Linda's tale has been a fascinating one to investigate. But if you think it's been a bit bleak, well, just consider, if she did live, she suffered one of the blackest periods in British history, and Linda did get that date absolutely right. So did Mary really exist? Well, as ever, that's for you to decide.
You said when those first pictures came up of the young Mary dressed in the brown, you said, "Oh my God, it looked just like that."
I know, I've gone all shaky in front. It made me want to cry again. That first image running across was exactly the first image I saw as I was regressed back to Mary's life. That child running, and it was just that picture was exactly what I'd seen. So I'm taken aback a bit.
You all right? We would all think from school that the bubonic plague, the Great Plague, was in the 1660s. But of course, you've managed to come up with the date of the previous giant plague in 1348.
And I'm not particularly academic, and my history isn't good. And I didn't know that was the date. And I also, these boils, I mean, if I think about plague, I think about kind of leprosy or a skin rash or something, or flu symptoms. I wouldn't have thought boils. Would you? I wouldn't have thought boils.
No, not at all. What about the
So
house?
that's really shocked me.
You,
And the house, I mean, I may have read as a child how they made houses in those days, but to be that accurate, it's just really shocked me. But to burst into tears like that, I mean, I was living that person's life and going through the emotions, and, you know, seeing that glass on the table, it's as vivid now as it is when you're going through regression. You're actually there, and you're actually feeling and living that life. When I was lying there, the arm that I said I'd hurt, I've got my arms crossed like that, and they are the same colour now, but the one underneath was white when I'm actually under the regression. And I'm sort of clinging on to it, as you would, I suppose, a useless limb.
And what about the trauma? You did lose great swathes of your family.
Yeah, I think it was 4 babies, and then obviously to see everybody die, and I was the last one to die of the plague. But when I was talking about the children, it was as upsetting as, you know, I remember feeling afterwards, you know, going home and grabbing onto my kids and thinking, oh my God, I can't imagine to have lost 4 babies. And I mean, you know, you think, oh, well, in those times they probably didn't care as much, but of course they did. They were still their offspring.
What about cold now? Are you a person who hates being cold now?
I absolutely hate being cold, yes. I hate being cold. So that is a similarity.
It's interesting that you have got that major issue in that past life of the boils. You know, the one thing someone who's concerned about their looks would end up with, you know, these rampant boils all over their body.
But I remember that I had the same face in that life. It was me. It wasn't a different looking person. It was me.
That's even more telling that you actually saw yourself disfigured in a way.
Yeah, well, with the arm and everything else. It was strange. I think that shocked me afterwards, because I thought, I didn't realise that in a past life you would have the same outer body, but I did have the same outer body. So I don't know. Do you believe in life past lives?
Well, that's the question we're asking, you see, because it's up to you. I mean, you've heard what Linda thinks. You've got to make your own mind up. What do you believe? Here's what our experts have got to say about it all.
People might think that the events that they appear to be remembering during past life regression are events that really did happen, but they didn't. They're based on imagination and fantasy. They might still be able to provide you with some kind of psychological insights into your current psychological state, but that's not because you had these past lives, it's just because it's providing some kind of framework to help you to think about things.
Linda's regression into a plague victim, to me, suggests that she has a deep-seated fear of getting older, of getting her looks go, and also of ailments, of physical disability. In the end of her regression, she looked at her body, it was covered in black boils, or boils, a symptom of bubonic plague, and I think this suggests to me that she has a great fear, as many people do, in fact we all do, of getting older, losing your looks, and becoming in some way disfigured.
In Linda's past life, you saw things that happened that maybe brought about issues of low self-esteem, which she's admitted that she's struggled with in this lifetime, even though she's been given all the attributes in this lifetime not to have low self-esteem, i.e. being attractive and being in the media. So I would say Linda's sole theme for this lifetime is to learn about being more self-confident.
So there you go. When it comes down to it, there is, of course, only one question. What do you believe? What do you believe now? Do you think that you have been here before?
I personally don't think so. I think it's either memory cells passed down by generation after generation, or it's just a very vivid imagination with lots of facts that you've read that you don't remember that you've read, because she's gone so deep into the subconscious. She's opened books and things in your head that you didn't even know were there. And that's my only way of dealing with it, so that's what I believe.
A vivid dream?
Yeah.
All right, Linda, thank you very much. Join us again next time for another chance to explore the possibility that we might all have been here before.